We received a call about a noise complaint in one of the most exclusive areas of Beverly Hills. It was a massive mansion, perched on a hill with a breathtaking view. Night had already fallen, and the city below shimmered like a sea of stars. My partner Mike and I were assigned to check it out. Apparently the neighbors were bothered by the sound of a never-ending party. It wasn't the kind of incident we were usually concerned about, but something felt off from the start. When we arrived at the mansion, there was no loud music or signs of a party. The house was lit up, but the gates were open, which was unusual for such an expensive place. Mike and I exchanged a look before heading inside. We knocked on the door, but no one answered. We called out again, and still, silence. We decided to go in, thinking it might just be a misunderstanding. The entrance hall was enormous, with a crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling, reflecting the light in a nearly hypnotic way. Everything looked immaculately clean, but there was a strange odor in the air, something like mold mixed with something sweet. We kept calling out for someone, anyone, but the house was as silent as a tomb. As we explored the mansion, we came across a room filled with antique furniture, clearly very valuable. In the center, there was a record player, playing a soft yet melancholic melody. It was a song I didn't recognize, but it immediately unsettled me. That's when Mike pointed at the walls. There were portraits everywhere, but the eyes of the people in the paintings seemed to follow us with every step. "This is giving me the creeps," Mike muttered, and I agreed. We decided to check upstairs, but as we began to climb the stairs, the music started to slow down, distorting in a disturbing way. At the top of the stairs, there was a door slightly ajar, with a faint light spilling through the crack. We approached cautiously, and when I pushed the door open, it was a child's room, decorated in soft shades of blue and white. Old toys were scattered across the floor, and an empty crib sat against the wall. But what caught our attention the most was the massive window overlooking the city. Something was wrong. The lights of Beverly Hills, which had once shone so brightly, now seemed dimmed, as if darkness was spreading over the city. Then, the door to the room slammed shut with a deafening bang. We rushed to try and open it, but it seemed locked from the inside. That's when that sweet odor grew stronger, and the music, it started playing backward. A low guttural sound echoed through the room, coming from all directions. My heart pounded so fast I thought I might faint. Finally, we managed to break the door down and ran outside. But when we looked back at the mansion, we saw something that froze us in place. All the windows were covered in mist, except for one. On the upper floor, a dark figure stood watching us, motionless. Its eyes, they glowed in the darkness, like those of a wild animal. Back at the station, no one believed our story. But what happened next was even worse. The house was investigated the following morning, but it was empty, as if no one had lived there for years. Everything was covered in dust, except for one thing. In the center of the hall, the same record player still playing that distorted melody. But the worst part came later when we reviewed the security footage from our operation. In every recording, from the moment we entered the mansion, there was a shadowy figure following us, reflected in every mirror, always one step behind. Now, every night, when I'm home, I hear that same melody playing softly. And sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see that figure in the background, coming closer and closer, and I fear that one day, it will finally reach me.
During the 1990s, I was an investigator in Costa Rica, and it was during this time that I received one of the most disturbing cases of my career. An isolated cabin, hidden in the forests near Manuel Antonio, had become the site of something terrible. When I arrived, the crime scene was a mess. Overturned furniture, bloodstains on the floor, but no signs of the bodies. The only object that could provide clues about what had happened was a VHS tape, left on the table. Curious and unsettled, I took the tape back to the station, unaware that I was about to plunge into a nightmare. When I inserted the tape into the VCR, and the image filled the screen, I was transported into the story of two American tourists, young and full of life. The video started innocently, with the two friends exploring the vibrant streets of San Jose, visiting the Mercado Central and sampling local foods. They filmed everything, laughing and enjoying themselves. But something about the recording felt off. There was a third voice, a sort of whisper, so faint it was almost imperceptible, but it was there, accompanying every moment. The recording shifted to Manuel Antonio Beach, where the young women relaxed in the sun and played in the clear water. But when they decided to explore a little-known trail, things started to go wrong. The camera shook as they walked down the increasingly narrow path. The sounds of the forest were intense, but there was something else, something that didn't belong. The wind began to blow strangely, and the rustling leaves sounded almost human. The trail seemed to tighten as they advanced, as if the jungle was trying to swallow them. The camera captured a moment when one of them stopped, clearly frightened. She mentioned feeling like they were being watched, but the other laughed and encouraged them to keep going. Then something bizarre happened. The camera recorded a fleeting figure in the shadows of the trees, something that shouldn't have been there. When the camera panned to the side, a set of glowing eyes briefly appeared in the darkness. The young women didn't notice, but I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched. The video continued with the friends trying to find a waterfall, but instead they came across a clearing with a crude altar made of stacked stones and animal bones. A sense of imminent danger hung in the air. Those stones weren't there by chance. The sound around them grew eerily quiet, as if the jungle was holding its breath. Then the friend holding the camera started to tremble. She filmed her hand involuntarily, as if trying to show that she couldn't stop shaking. The other friend was pale, seemingly experiencing the same sensation. Suddenly, the video shook and the camera fell, showing only the treetops for a few seconds. The sound on the tape became distorted, as if something was interfering. Suddenly, a desperate scream filled the air, but the camera remained focused on the sky. Then, the sound of running footsteps, breaking branches, and a second scream, even more desperate. When the camera was lifted again, one of the friends was lying on the ground, unconscious, while the other was out of control, completely distraught. The tape abruptly cut to a new scene, where only one of the young women was visible, the same one who had been unconscious earlier. She was dirty, covered in blood, with a lost look in her eyes. "He's here. He will never let us leave," she whispered, her eyes fixed on something off camera. Before I could process what was happening, the video ended with a loud sound, a thud followed by a moan of pain, and the screen went black. For days, I rewatched the tape, trying to find a rational explanation. But each time I watched, more sinister details seemed to emerge, as if the tape was changing. I started to notice that in some scenes, there were shadows that hadn't been there before, as if something was getting closer and closer to the camera. The figure with glowing eyes was present in almost every scene, always hidden, but getting nearer each time. The last time I watched the tape, something impossible happened. The image on the screen distorted, and for a brief second, I felt as if the figure was looking directly at me from the other side of the screen. I immediately turned off the tape, feeling a deep terror, as if I was being watched at that very moment. Since then, I've had nightmares about that jungle, that figure, and those young women. Sometimes, as I am trying to sleep, I hear whispers in my room, the same ones from the tape. And then, when I glance into the dark corner of the room, I see something moving, A shadow that shouldn't be there. Maybe I should have never watched that tape.
My name is Hank, and I'm the sheriff in Marfa, Texas, a small and isolated town in the middle of the desert, known for its mysterious lights. People always talk about them, lights that appear and disappear on the horizon without explanation. I never really believed in those stories, until that night. We received a call about a house on the outskirts of town. The neighbors were worried because they hadn't seen the family in days, and I felt uneasy as I drove out there. The house looked deserted, but all the lights were on, and the family's car was in the garage. When I knocked on the door, no one answered. I called out several times, but only silence replied. I decided to break in. The inside of the house was eerily tidy, as if everyone had vanished in the middle of their daily routines. Plates were still on the kitchen table, breakfast half eaten, curtains gently swaying as if touched by a breeze, but there was no wind that night. A chill ran down my spine, but I pressed on, calling for anyone who might be there. Finally, I reached the basement. The door was ajar, and a strange smell wafted up from below. I descended with my flashlight in hand, and what I found down there took my breath away. Strange symbols were painted on all the walls. Symbols I'd never seen before, like something from an ancient ritual. In the center of the basement, there was a camera, still recording, pointed at a specific corner of the room, where a large circle was drawn on the floor with a mixture of charcoal and what looked like blood. I picked up the camera and reviewed the footage. The video began with the family sitting around a table, visibly nervous, murmuring words in what sounded like an unknown language. In the middle of the table was an old photograph of the town of Marfa, but the image seemed distorted, as if something was out of place. Footsteps echoed in the video, but no one was moving. Suddenly, one of the children at the table started shaking uncontrollably, their eyes rolling back. The mother screamed, but her words made no sense, like she was in a deep trance. The camera then focused on the father, who slowly stood up and began drawing the same symbols I saw in the basement, muttering something under his breath. The camera's microphone picked up strange noises in the background, like whispers coming from nowhere. The most disturbing scene was when the camera shook, as if someone had knocked it over. The video cut to darkness for a few seconds, and when the image returned, the room was empty. There was no sign of the family, just the sound of heavy breathing, growing louder until the video abruptly ended. Suddenly, I felt a presence around me. My flashlight started flickering, and I swear I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around quickly, but there was no one there. Adrenaline surged through me, and I decided to get out of that basement immediately. As I reached the top of the stairs, the lights in the house went out, leaving me in total darkness. That's when I saw them through the window. The Marfa lights, brighter and closer than ever. I ran out of the house and jumped into my patrol car, trying to start the engine, but it wouldn't respond. The Marfa lights began to move toward me, and the radio in the car blared with loud static, followed by a voice I didn't recognize, telling me to run. And then, something hit the window of the patrol car. It was a hand, but not a human hand. The skin was pale, almost translucent, with long, thin fingers. Without thinking twice, I got out of the car and ran as fast as I could. The Marfa lights followed, illuminating the desert around me. I didn't know where I was running. I just wanted to get away from that thing. But then, I felt something grab my leg. I fell to the ground, and when I looked back, I saw a figure shrouded in shadows, with glowing eyes and a wide smile that didn't belong in this world. Everything went dark. When I woke up, I was back at my house, with no memory of how I got there. My wife said she found me at the door in a state of shock, but I knew something was wrong. The Marfa lights never appeared again for the townsfolk, but sometimes, at night, I see reflections in the mirror. Those glowing eyes, watching me again, and I fear that one day, they will come for me for real.